So our next story that Sherazad was saying is the story of King Sinbad and the Falcon. You must know that there was a Persian king with a passion for enjoyment and amusement, who had a fondness for hunting. He had reared a falcon, which was his constant companion by day and by night, and which would spend the night perched on his wrist. He would take it hunting with him, and he had a golden bowl made for the falcon, which he hung around his neck and from which it could drink. One day the chief falconer came to where he was sitting and told him that it was time to go hunting. The king gave the orders, and the falcon went off his wrist until he and his party reached a wadi, where they spread out their hunting cordon. Trapped in this was a gazelle, and the king threatened that anyone who allowed it to leap over his head would be put to death. When the cordon was narrowed and the gazelle came to where the king was posted, it supported itself on its hind legs and placed its forelegs on its chest as though it was kissing the ground before him. He bent his head towards it, and then it jumped over him, making for the open country. He noticed that his men were looking at him and winking at each other, and when he asked his vizier what this meant, the man explained. They were pointing out that you said that if anyone let the gazelle jump over his head, he would be killed. The king swore that he would hunt it down, and he rode off in pursuit, following the gazelle until he came to a mountain. There it was about to pass through a cleft when the king loosened his falcon at it, and the bird clawed at the gazelle's eyes, blinding and dazing it so the king could draw his mace and knock it over with a single blow. He then dismounted his horse and cut the gazelle's throat, after which he skinned it and tied it to his saddlebow. As this was in the noonday heat and the region was desolate and waterless, both the king and his horse were thirsty now. The king scouted round and discovered a tree from which looked like liquid butter was dripping. Wearing a pair of kid gloves, he took the bowl from the falcon's neck, filled it with this liquid, and set it in front of the bird. But the bird knocked the bowl and overturned it. The king took it, filled it again, thinking that the falcon must be thirsty, but the same thing happened when he put it down a second time. This annoyed him, and he went a third time to fill the bowl and take it to his horse, but this time the falcon upset it with his wing. The king cursed the falcon, explaining, "You are the unluckiest of birds. You have stopped me drinking. You have stopped yourself and the horse." He then struck off its wing with a blow from his sword, but the bird raised his head as though to say by its gesture, "Look at the top of the tree." The king raised his eyes, and what he saw there was a brood of vipers whose poison was dripping down. Immediately regretting what he had done, he mounted his horse and drove back to his pavilion, bringing with him the gazelle, which he handed to the cook, telling the cook to take it and roast it. He sat on his chair with the falcon on his wrist, drew his last breath, and died, leaving the king to exclaim with sorrow for having killed it when it had saved his life. And so ends the story of King Sinbad. "Great king," the vizier said, "Sinbad acted out of necessity, and I can see nothing wrong in that. I myself am acting out of sympathy for you, so that you may realize that I am right, and otherwise you may meet the same fate as the vizier who schemed against the prince." "How was that?" the king asked, and the vizier said. The next story is the story of the treacherous vizier.